You see, something is going to happen. Something wonderful.
My God, it's full of stars.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the NY Patriot Show. Today I will be covering a special topic that I have. Once I came across it, I don't think I ever really got tired of it. One of the few topics I have covered myself. It is even a topic that the Occult Rejects did well over a year ago now, but I do think it's a topic that could be brought up again. And I do like hearing other people's takes on it and stuff that they found. So we are revisiting the gateway process, or Stargate, or wherever we want to, say it started or whatever. And I have on Ryder Lee from Raised by Giants with us today. Ryder, would you like to let everybody know where they can find your show and maybe a little bit of what it's about, and, why you started it?
Yes, sir. Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Of course, thank you.
You can find me on Raised by Giants on YouTube, Raised by Giants on all the different podcast platforms, on Rockfin, Odyssey, and Rumble as well. Now, as far as the reason that I started the show was I was kind of interested in a lot of different topics in the beginning, starting in like whenever I first, some say awakened, but I don't really like those kinds of terms that
I don't think there's
people
one out there
alter.
that sounds good, right? It's
There,
like,
there
can we
really
come up
is.
with a cool one, actually? A cool term?
Yeah, we need to revamp the terms that we've been using in this community, but for all intents and purposes, awakened, right? Because everyone knows it. Was around 2008 whenever I watched the film Zeitgeist, and that really just opened the door of all of these different possibilities. And I think that there's steps and there's different kinds of quote unquote awakenings throughout our entire life. Like, and that one was the awakening to the corruption side of what's going on in our reality, the governmental corruption, our monetary system, religion with controlling the population. And then after that, I just started, digging into all these different topics. And I'm like, holy shit, our reality is nothing like what we've been led to believe. Everything is way different than the way that it's being portrayed. And I started diving into the community on YouTube back when YouTube was actually a good platform to be able to have your content on, where they had that sidebar where you could click on one video and then you can go down a rabbit hole on the
Yes, I
whole
do
entire
remember
related
that.
videos.
I
Those were the
remember
good
that.
days. And I just started getting all of this, this information and collecting all this information. And then in 2020, which it didn't have anything to do with what was really going on in the world, I just decided that I wanted to do it. And all of these other interviewers and these other podcast people that were doing this, I'm like, hey, like, I feel like that I can be doing this too. So I just started my show, and it started out, like everybody else. Well, some people with 0 people following me,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's just evolved and developed from things that I was interested in, and then it's really evolved into a hardcore research aspect of this and using common sense and critical thinking and logic behind it, because there's so much nonsense in this community, not only in the conspiratorial community, but just the alternative community as a whole. It's just been compounded upon unverifiable stories, and then another group of people comes along and then adds their unverifiable stories onto already unverifiable stories, and then it just snowballs into a completely snowballs into a disaster basically, and
Yes,
people don't know what to
yes.
believe. And that's the angle that I'm coming at it with right now, is the people that I interview, the people that I bring on, I believe personally. Now, other people can disagree or think
Of
that
course, yeah.
they're full of shit or whatever. But I personally believe, through my research, are 100% genuine people that aren't spewing a bunch of bullshit. And that's been my
Good for
whole
you.
thing for like the past year, is to bring on very credible people, whether that be from the DIA, Army intelligence, psychic spy programs, whether that be MK Ultra victims, whether that be researchers, whether that be UFO researchers, or uh, anybody like that that has real credibility behind them and knows what they're talking about. Because again, we have so many people in this community that just come on and talk about nonsensical bullshit stories all the time. You know, and that's fine if like you want to, you know, if people want to listen to that, but that's really put a weird muddying of the waters between real researchers and real people that are trying to get to
Mm,
the bottom of these things. And I have come to the conclusion that almost 70 to 80% of the things that are talked about in this community are put there to cover up real
mm,
programs, real things that are happening on the earth, really what we might actually be doing in space. And it's put there on purpose as a disinformation and misinformation. Because if you get people believing in the exaggerated nonsense fairy tale stories of alien abduction, traveling in space, 20 and back programs, super soldiers, all this kind of nonsense, then the real thing can be brushed under the rug and no one will even look at the real thing. And this is another problem that I found, is that a lot of people, they do this weird thing where they talk about a few different subjects that are real, and then they compound what they think and their own thoughts and ideas onto it, and then it turns it into something else. It's like a unverifiability, right?
theories
Where
start to becoming truth.
yeah,
And I say that I think that's a huge problem a lot with. Unfortunately, I think like just something I've noticed in the community recently is that it even like with social media, I think it's like a problem with a lot of memes. Or these like shit posting, which I do myself, but sometimes a lot of people it's just like they shit. They drop a meme and don't even like, oh, that sounds good. Quick copy, screenshot. Let me trim it up, and repost it. It's like, did you even check if any of that? It just sounded nice. Did you even check if it's even real or correct? And it's,
and
it's
that is a huge problem too. I'm glad you mentioned that, because there's a lot of things that are put in memes that are completely untrue. Like there was this one meme that I looked up the other day, which is very small and it's unrelated to anything that we're going to be talking about, but it just proves the point. There was this meme that was circulating around that a skeleton whip made out of people's spines, human spines, was found in Wisconsin, right?
mm,
And I was like, oh well, how would that work? How would a whip made out of human spines, dead human being spines, be able to not just crumble apart and fall apart? So then I was like, oh well, I'm just going to look this up really quick to try and verify it. And it turns out that it's a completely fake, made up story, right? So, but that's how easy things can snowball and become something that's real. And I talk about this all the time, and I'm sure you're familiar with this concept, which is called uh, egregores, and
oh yeah,
it's an occult term that's used uh, to where whatever you put your energy, your thoughts, your ideas, and your beliefs behind, it in turn creates that thought, idea, and belief in your reality, regardless if it's real or not real.
yeah,
And that's how I think that a lot of just anything in our reality continuously gets perpetuated, because there's a certain amount of people in the world that believes that something's real when there's no proof, there's no evidence behind it, but yet it is still real to them because it's been created by them, created by their thought process, their beliefs, and their ideas backing it.
yeah. I know. I totally agree. I even like think like what I was just saying before with like sharing memes or like even stuff that you just see is like getting repeated by everybody. To me, that's almost like kind of like feeding or creating the egregore in itself. All of that. So I definitely understand what you're getting at. I think.
And they've used this. They've weaponized this against us, right? They know how thoughts, ideas, and beliefs work in this reality. So therefore, an event doesn't even have to be real. They just have to give the public the perception that it is real.
Yes.
And then everyone believes it, and it becomes real. That's what they do through the TV. That's the whole goal, is to get people to believe something that isn't real. And again, when you believe something that isn't real and you feel like that you're not getting the truth of the matter, it's kind of like with the ET phenomenon and the UFO phenomenon, right?
Mm,
People think that the government has been covering up the existence of ETs and UFOs for a long period of time. Now, this didn't come from the government. This came from the people. We created that. We created that scenario because we felt like that they were hiding something when they've been telling us this entire time, after every single major event, every single major UFO sighting or crash landing or whatever, there's always a military officer, someone from the Air Force, someone high up in government does a press conference and says, we have no reason to believe that this event involved anything extraterrestrial or alien.
mm.
And people, they don't buy that because the distrust within the government has been so high for so long that even if they're telling you the truth, people aren't going to believe it.
Yeah. Well, I thought was interesting, and then we'll get on to the topic. But what I thought was interesting with even with like those balloons. The White House never once said they were a UFO, but yet everybody, not everybody. I saw plenty of people though on social media saying that the White House is trying to talk about UFOs as a psyop. I'm like, they actually never said it was a UFO. They just said it was a balloon. So like, where did there was even like there was a disconnect between what it was actually being said and what people were repeating. There was never once UFO mentioned.
And you know who started that? Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp really started that whole thing. As soon as the government said that there was Chinese spy balloons, they were immediately on social media and doing videos and interviews and all this, talking about that it's not really a Chinese spy balloon, it's ETs and extraterrestrials. So whenever you have the population out there looking for ETs and extraterrestrials and not for a Chinese spy balloon, then you have officially diverted the attention of the public, and whatever was actually happening out there doesn't get any attention.
Yes.
And that's exactly what's been done. And it's not just with UFOs and aliens and all that. It's with anything that's happening. It's a classic CIA technique, right? They'll take the truth and then they will exaggerate that truth and put out mis and disinformation to cover up what it really happened, right? And it's either exaggerated or de-escalated, right? So if they say that, if really this is just a completely made up story, right? If they say that 100 people died in a train accident, right? But really only two people died, right? Then that gets away from the real actual event, and then they can also be like, oh well, there was a train accident, but nobody died, which then undercuts the entire situation. Right?
Yes. No, I know what
It
you're
works
getting
on
at.
both ends of the spectrum.
I totally agree. Um, yeah. So I guess. Well, for one, I'm glad to hear you say that because I do agree with a lot of the things you said. Before we get on to the topic, I just want to say, like, I do think even the conspiracy community itself, I think, is kind of like has been infected with just bullshit. And if that's done on purpose or just happened organically, who knows? But I do, even when it comes to occultism, unfortunately, I do think there has been a misunderstanding of it, and that has been deemed as truth. And then people misunderstand that, like you were saying, add to it, and it almost becomes a lie, really. when people start, talking about occultism, or I mean, even silly things where it's like, oh, that symbol means this and this means that. I'm just like, where'd you get that from? I'm just like, all right. But it's, whatever. It's a shame. But I totally agree. And that's kind of why I even started my shows, because I do have like experience with fucking around with magic for a while, that I was just like, I think I can add something to like the truth, because I do think there's a big misconception about magic and how serious I think it is. So I tried to start my show, because I think of the misunderstanding out there, even in the conspiracy community. So I get what you're saying. Not to go off the topic, but maybe at the end, I would love to get an idea of the UFOs and aliens, because you did mention it a few times, and I happen to have a little bit different of a view. Maybe we might share the same thing, but maybe at the end, if we have some time, maybe I'll just get a little bit of that out of you. It might be another topic.
Absolutely.
It might be another topic I could have you on for, because I don't play it's like these ships and these little people. I think it's much more deeper than that, actually. So if somebody else can even entertain that idea, I'm all for it. Even if your theory isn't the same as mine, at least we're thinking of something besides a spaceship and little green men.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
that's the misdirection of the whole thing, and it's.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge misdirection and something to get people looking outside of themselves for, that is impossible to control, right? Because if it's little green men, if it's aliens coming from off the planet, from other star systems and all this, that's doing all these genetic manipulations on us and abducting us and all that, and they put that out there as the truth, then we can't do anything about that, right? We can't do anything about aliens and extraterrestrial, because they're so much further advanced than we are, and they have these advanced craft, and they can travel interdimensionally.
You know what's funny, and a lot of people in the conspiracy community will kind of say it was like almost back, like 9/11 was kind of like, I mean, prior, I guess you can say, the Cold War, if you really think about it. But there's always been like this fear of something somewhere that we can't see here is going to get us. And if you really think about it, I'm wondering if like aliens might actually be the original idea. Because I mean, that is prior to even like some things that I think the government has, bullshitted about. I do question if that might be the original, like, fear the thing you can't see. Because that is an ultimate mind fuck. It's fearing something you can't see, you don't know when it's coming.
Yeah, I think that might be a part of the human condition, and us not knowing anything about our existence here.
Yeah.
Right? And then we automatically fear something outside of ourselves, and religion has been a big cause of that too, through, not just Christianity, but a lot of the other religion is a fear type programming, right? You need to be a good person, or else when you die, you're going to go to hell, right? And you're going to burn in a fiery pit for the rest of eternity, right? And then it becomes, well, if you're a good person and you do everything right, and you're living your life according to other people's needs, and you're helping people and all this, then you're going to go to heaven, right? Which is a really paradoxical thing to me, and it makes people be good and do things right for a reward, right? That's what Christians are really all about. They think that, well, if they're doing everything good and they're nice and they're turning the other cheek and living like Jesus was, that they're going to get rewarded, right? And that has trickled down into our society with everything that we do. It seems like people only do good for other people because they're expecting some kind of reward.
Yeah, what I think is a big difference between like this stuff, I think there's people that will do it, like you said, for a reward. And then I think maybe not so much religiously, but maybe spiritually, sometimes people will have an experience and then do it because they realize it's just the right thing to do. For the right person to be, that's totally two different reasons to do it, actually.
and that's what we all should be doing. We
Yes.
should be doing it because it's the right thing to do. We shouldn't be doing it because we're expecting to go to heaven whenever we die, or that we're going to get something in return for being good to people.
I
That
think you'd
should
be
be
better off being confused about if those even exist, but I'm just being a good person because I should be. And that's the
Yeah.
right thing to do. I think you got it better than people who do it out of fear. You
Exactly.
know? So that's cool, man. Cool. I like that little chat that we had before we got into the topic. And speaking of magic, which we were talking about before, I guess for me, why I think this topic is very entertaining and interesting to me, I do think that there is a lot of magic actually involved with this whole gateway process. Especially because it gets into sounds and tones and all that crap and frequencies, and I do think that does boil down to magic in a sense. So that is another reason why I just love entertaining this project process, whatever the fuck you want to call it.
Well,
So
it's really freaking convoluted, dude.
yeah,
There's so much to do, and I've read through all the declassified documents that have to do with this topic.
that shit
And
is so interesting. I wish everybody who ever listened to my show or anybody else's show on this actually read the documents, because I think you would get so much out of that just reading it. Shut off my show and go read the documents. That would make me happy.
but that's the thing, is whenever you start bringing up documents and going over them and stuff, people just like tune out, right? Because they've been programmed for the exaggerated thing that they think that people that they don't know anything about, right? i've uh I've ran into this problem a lot whenever you start digging down into the research of MK Ultra, right, or the Stargate project, which it wasn't named the Stargate project in the beginning. It went by several other
Yeah,
names:
that is true.
Grill Flame, Gondola Wish, and Sunstreak.
Sunstreak, that was the one I was
And
thinking of.
when you start getting into those things, it's like people just kind of like tune out for some reason, because it's like they're like real and verifiable. Like anybody can look these things up and research this and figure it out, but they want something that they can't verify for some reason, right? And it's it's really interesting, the back and forth here. And I think that the community is going to start taking a hard right turn toward more research based and
Mm.
more documentation and more proof and more um, verifiable sources in the future,
Well,
right?
you know
Because I think
what's
people are tired of these stories that have absolutely zero proof and zero evidence backing them. And that's why I interviewed almost everyone that I possibly could from the DIA Army Intelligence Remote Viewing Psychic Spy program.
okay?
I had Angela Ford on, I had Lynn Buchanan on, I had Dale Graft on, I had Dr. David Morehouse on, I had Dr. Paul Smith on, right? To give a verifiable story to what the government was doing as far as ESP research and psychic research. And then that evolved into me getting all these documents sent to me so that way I can go over them and put together a solid timeline, because the DIA and the military service have all at one time or another been involved in numerous psychoenergetics tests.
Have you ever heard
Most
of Jessica Utz or Jessica Betts or something like that?
No, I haven't.
You
It
might,
doesn't
I
sound
might try if I can come across her name. I'll send you the information on her. She was involved very shortly with the Gateway process of Stargate, and she's also like done work with Bigelow. So if you've interviewed people that were involved with this, maybe she'll give you some attention too and talk to you. You're not like some dude out of left field that hasn't spoken to anybody yet. You might find her interesting. Sorry to
this is-
interrupt you. It's just I know she's
Yeah.
also involved with like NASA and like Bigelow and shit like that. So that could be a good, interesting person to talk to.
Yeah, if you can find her information, send it to me and I'll do some research on her. But this is a really important thing to clear up right off the gate, because there was a lot of different programs that were running during this time period of the Cold War since the early 70s, right? The Gateway Project was completely separate from Army intelligence and DIA and the CIA. Gateway Project was a project that was run by the Monroe Institute, which was to hemisync the brain through frequencies to induce an out of body experience. Had nothing to do with remote viewing or psychics, though Army intelligence did pay Monroe Institute $2,000 to send their Army personnel to Monroe Institute to study with Robert Monroe. But that's really the only connection that we have there between the DIA, Army intelligence, CIA program, and the Gateway Project, right? And this is a confusing thing that people get the waters muddied there, is that some people that were involved with the Gateway Project, like I mentioned, had nothing to do with remote viewing. It was to induce an out of body experience, like an astral projection or an astral
Mhm.
travel kind of experience. And separate from that was the Stargate Project, which the Stargate Project did not become named the Stargate Project until 92, when Delgraft changed the name to from Sunstreak to Stargate, because he felt like that it gave more of a an explanation about what they were actually doing with the mind, right? So really, where a lot of this starts is with SRI, Stanford Research Institute, but the government was also doing studies on parapsychology with Duke University in the 30s, Parapsychology Foundation in New York in the 50s, Mind Science Foundation in the 60s, and other research foundations and centers earlier than SRI. But the thing that really kicked off this whole thing was SRI in the early 70s here. So SRI split from Stanford University in 1970. And then in 77, they became known as SRI International. But in 73, SRI started studying psychic phenomenon and then became funded by the CIA, right? And had consciousness researchers, Ingo Swann and Pat Price. And this started a research project known as Syndicate in 1973. Syndicate was a SRI project to determine if remote viewing uh, parapsychological energetic phenomenon was real, because if it was possible that the subjects at SRI, that being Ingo Swann or Pat Price, could use psychic powers to collect information, they would they be getting that information subliminally or on the target, or somehow getting it from memory? So they started running a bunch of tests, and during the testing, Ingo Swann was given a coordinate, and he described some kind of military base in the woods, right? The Then that coordinate was given to a man referred to as Pat in the official declassified documents, but we know his name now as Pat Price. So when Pat Price got the coordinates to verify Ego Swann's remote viewing of the suspected military base, he described the exact same thing, but in way larger detail. He described wind speed, altitude, the surrounding area, that it was an underground base in West Virginia. And Russell Targ asked him to view this location again to see if he could get any, if he could get inside of the facility and look for documents to
Oh,
try
is
and
this the one with
obtain.
the document like on top of a like? Oh, that's wild.
Yeah,
Sorry to
with
interrupt
the,
you. Go ahead.
yeah. So he did, and he got inside of this facility psychically with his mind to try and find classified information inside of the facility. Now, keep in mind, this facility was a top secret facility in West Virginia. No one even knew about it. And he got in there with his mind and got inside of the facility and saw papers labeled fly trap. I think one was mine run, and a file cabinet on the wall labeled Operation Pool, with folders inside of the cabinet labeled cue ball, 14 ball, 4 ball, 8 ball, and rack up. Right. And he said that the site vaguely seemed named Hayfork or Haystack. Right. And he even got the names of the generals at the facility. Right. I think one of them was Colonel R.J. Hamilton and Major General George Nash or something like that. But it's, those people are all dead and gone by now. So it's not really that big of information, but he was getting it. And this got the attention of DIA and Army intelligence and really all of the intelligence and military community. Right. They were basically scared shitless. Right. I personally believe because if someone can access a top secret military installation and get classified information from that psychically with their mind, then who else could be possibly doing that? Could our enemies do the same thing? So in 1976, the Missile Intelligence Agency informally expressed interest in the U.S. Replication of claimed Soviet experiments in psychoenergetics, because this was another supposed way that the intelligence community got involved. Was they received intel that the Soviets were doing this research, so they had to play like catch up, which I think is an official excuse to start up a psychic spy program, because I can't find any supporting evidence that Russia was legitimately using psychics and remote viewers as
That was just their
intelligence data
excuse, though,
collection.
right?
I think so, but I do have a Russian document, Russian declassified document of the study of remote viewing, but it doesn't mention anything about them using remote viewers as a form to collect foreign intelligence data. But anyway, SRI developed a small program for the Missile Intelligence Agency, and Missile Intelligence Agency awarded SRI with a 1-year research and development contract. During that same time, the Army Material Systems Analysis Agency was involved in the investigation of remote viewing concepts with SRI. They had like a contract with SRI. And then in 1977, U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command established a project team under the Assistant Deputy Chief of Staff for Human Intelligence and implemented the Gondola Wish program in Fort Meade. By 1978, the Army intelligence concluded that there was sufficient evidence to warrant the program to explore intelligence collection of psychoenergetics. And the Army then canceled that Gondola Wish program and placed a complete security envelope over the Army's interest in psychoenergetics and implemented a new program directed toward intelligence collection using remote viewing and remote viewers, and that project was called Grill Flame.
Oh wow! Oh, you know what's something just want to ask you real quick before you keep going on. From what I remember, I could be wrong. When I was getting into like all these like little names before it got into what it got, didn't it also like change like the hands of people who were involved with running it as well?
Yes.
I almost feel like it's like, okay, we found something you can't know anymore. We're gonna go start it over. It's almost like another way of decompartmentalizing like what everybody knows too.
Yes, it has changed hands several times. There's been collaborations between DIA, Army Intelligence, CIA. At one point, they were all kind of just all in the mix. And the Grill Flame project was to use remote viewing as a data collection or intelligence collection method. And by 1978, INSCOM, which is the United States Army Intelligence and Security Command, had the personnel they wanted in the program and had been elected, and training was initiated. And who trained those Army personnel? That would be Ingo Swan from SRI was training the Army personnel on how to remote view. Now, this isn't confirmed by any documentation, which I'm beginning to become a little sus of. Ingo Swan training Army intelligence in any kind of official capacity. Now, Army intelligence did have a contract with SRI, and Army intelligence kind of subcontracting SRI to do work for them on the side. And Ingo was a test subject for SRI, and all of the remote viewing remote viewers that I've interviewed from the unit that I've talked to said that they were trained by Ingo Swan, but then at the same time saying that SRI never walked through the doors at Fort Meade. So I'm still trying to work on this little component of it. So really now the issue they ran into was, would the information obtained from remote viewing and psychics be reasonable and accurate? And if so, would they be accepted and used in the intelligence community as like actual real intel? So on September 4th, 1979, Army ACSI tasked INSCOM to locate a missing Navy aircraft. This was the first Grill Flame operational remote viewing session, and the remote viewer apparently located the missing aircraft within 15 miles of where it was down. Now, based on those results, INSCOM was then tasked to work on additional targets. This forced the hand of ACSI to head into full swing operations and skip over a lot of the training phases of the unit. This is and a lot of the people in the unit that I've interviewed have said that they were only trained up into a certain point. So these documents are actually verifying they didn't actually go through all of Ingo Swan's levels of being able to remote view. Now, I did send you a clip. We have a clip to play, and this clip is of Jimmy Carter in '95 talking about a missing plane in Africa that the CIA contacted a lady in California to find this missing plane. And I've created this this reel. I did all the graphics, and the music is not copyrighted music, so we're 100% okay to play this. You won't get any dings for it.
Awesome. All right, here we go.
Only strange and inexplicable event that has been discussed publicly is that one time we had a small plane go down somewhere in Africa. We needed very much to find out where that plane had crashed, and we were not able to find it by surveillance from our satellites. So the director of the CIA, he was also director of all the intelligence agencies, heard about a woman in California that was a medium, and he contacted her, and she gave him the latitude and longitude of the plane's whereabouts. And the next time one of our space satellites went over that area, we located the plane where she said it was.
Which is really incredible that a president of the United States would talk about that. But what President Jimmy Carter said was half true. It wasn't a lady in California. That was a misdirection to try and cover up the programs that the military and these three-letter agencies was actually involved in. It was actually Dale Graff's small remote viewing unit at I can't even get the words out, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and specifically on a Air Force Base enlisted woman named Rosemary Smith, and also with the assistance from a gentleman within SRI. I believe his name was Gary Langford. And but the story is true, but not exactly how Jimmy Carter described it. So yeah, super interesting. So after this, then comes along the Perry Memorandum in 1980, which cut funding to psychoenergetics activities that didn't include any kind of intelligence application efforts. So in 1981, A few months later, ACSI transferred the project Grill Flame management to INSCOM, which is United States Army Intelligence and Security Command. They combined their efforts. This is what we were talking about a little earlier that you were referring to. They combined their efforts, and this wasn't the only time that things from this unit had been transferred or combined. The DIA and Army Intelligence ACSI signed a joint Grill Flame to implement a 3-year program. So the DIA's role in this joint operation was threat analysis, countermeasures, establish psychics, primarily through SRI contracts because they'd been working with SRI since '78. And CIA had been funding SRI International since '73. The U.S. Army's role, INSCOM, was to apply the remote viewing program, use assigned personnel, and the assigned personnel contract to enhance capability. Now, remember in the beginning when I said that almost every intelligence community, the military, and everyone had their hands in on the pot on this. Well, the merging of DIA and Army into one program also formalized cooperation among the Secretary of the Army, Army General Counsel, Assistant Surgeon General for Medical R&D, Vice Chief of Staff for the Army, NSA, CIA, and the Navy until 1982, when the budget committee cut the funding to Grill Flame because they thought that the project had been double budgeted and the funding coming from one funding coming from Army Intelligence and the other coming from DIA, where they were just both working on it together. But they let the DIA complete their 3rd year. So at the end of 1982, INSCOM, Army Intelligence, terminated their formal involvement with Grill Flame and the DIA. But then Army Intelligence opened up a new special access program called Center Lane in 1983. Dr. Richard Dahlier signed a memorandum allowing resources to be used to maintain and support Army Center Lane program, reversing the Perry Memorandum of 1980 with the funding by the security and investigative activities. So in 1983, the Army remote viewing SAP program became Center Lane and was decided it should be continued and should be under the overall management of the DIA. So then we get another combining of Army Intelligence and DIA programs. In 1984, it was decided that Center Lane Special Access Program ran by the Army should be more responsive and strategic to national level tasking. In order to do this, they needed to merge their unit with the DIA's Grill Flame unit. By 1985, the transfer from Army Intelligence Lane Center Lane project to DIA's Grill Flame program was complete and became a DoD Special Access Program. And the funding was restored because it was a pure intelligence and data collection program, no R&D stuff. So we get another name change after the combining of DIA and Army Intelligence, which was called Sunstreak.
There we go.
Yeah, dude, it gets so
and that's even like a few off from still, right? That's funny. Yeah. There's so many names in between these things. You know something I just want to ask you real quick before you go any farther? I know when I was covering, when we covered this a while ago, there was things that I think I kind of came across because of it, like might have spawned out of this stuff. Did you ever come across something with the NSA where they were like using, I think like, I could be wrong. I don't know if it was microwave frequencies, but they were like they were talking about how they could like use frequencies to actually like manipulate people, and they were saying that they should, that with the whatever capabilities they had, they could put like one person into the community, and they should be able to affect like 1,000 people around them. Do you remember coming across any like some wild stuff? Like I came across that, and I was like, this is like so like out there and off topic. I was like, I can't add this into the Stargate series or the Gateway series. It was just like a whole other rabbit hole in itself.
I think that they are connected, and the only mention of NSA was in the Grill Flame Sunstreak document that they were involved in some kind of way, whether that be funding or having their own program. But we do have evidence and patents for V2K technology, which V2K is to implant thoughts and ideas and beliefs into a subject's head. And
Yeah, wasn't that actually like an experiment done by a college?
what, the V2K?
Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of Y2K. Yeah, that was
No,
actually like a thought. I remember one time me and Lux came across something where it was actually like on some. I think it was like a college, might be Princeton. I could be completely wrong. Where they actually admit to it on their site that it was a mental psyop just to see how people react.
well, there's
I was
actual.
like, "Yo, you actually saying this online?" It's like, but you'd have to look for it. You know what I'm saying?
There are patents and there are real technologies that are verifiable. There's voice of God technology, there's V2K technology, there's patents out to manipulate the symphic nervous system of human beings on the planet. So, yes, the technology exists, but I think that that technology came more out of the experimentation that they were doing with the MK Ultra, CIA MK Ultra programs in the early 50s into the 70s. Now these two programs are very much connected because out of the 149 declassified MK Ultra sub projects, there were at least 4 to 5 sub projects that were directly related to study of psychic abilities, ESP, and telekinesis as well. So that's where the overlap comes in, and then you have Sidney Gottlieb doing those experiments through the MK Ultra programs, and then you have the CIA funding SRI International in '73 to further study psychics and ESP and remote viewing and psychokinesis, psychoenergetic experiments as well. So they were kind of like they were doubling up on everything that they were doing. See, this doesn't all just come from one agency, right? It's not just one agency that's doing it. Now, one agency might take the fall for it, just like the CIA took the fall for doing MK Ultra experiments. But what people don't know is that Army intelligence was also not Army intelligence. Well, it's suspected that they were doing MK Ultra experiments too, but the main one is the Air Force. The Air Force has been running MK Ultra experiments since the CIA has been running MK Ultra experiments too, but they've never been made to come out and declassify any of the documents that the Air Force ever did with MK Ultra, right?
Wow.
So and then you think, oh well, what would be the purpose of the Air Force doing MK Ultra experiments? Could it have something to do with UFOs and aliens?
Oh, wow. I like that.
So the mission of Sunstreak was to undertake operational intelligence application using an aspect of psychoenergetics known as remote viewing. Now, it also states in this Sunstreak document that the Soviet threat, which still is unproven. Like I stated earlier, there isn't any documented evidence that I can find that the Soviets were using psychoenergetics or remote viewing or psychics or ESP abilities to collect intelligence data on foreign targets, but it's still referenced in these documents. And they also refer to Chinese scientist claims to be using remote viewing with their experiments with children, right? And that is verifiable. And it also says that data on these experiments is insufficient, and to validate the claim even further, more studies would have to be done. And it says in the document as well that SRI was trying to duplicate these studies that the Chinese was doing. Now, I don't know if that means that they were also trying to work with children, but the paragraph on this document almost looks like it was attempted to be scribbled out, you know,
Oh.
but you can still see it. So the project ran under Sunstreak until 91, and that was changed to Stargate by Del Graft, which I had on my show, and he changed the name out of his own words on my show because he felt that it described what they were doing better with human potential aspect of what they were doing within the program. So in 95, the program was to be transferred back to the CIA from DOD and the DIA. The CIA got their hands on it and said no intelligence data had ever been collected from the program, and they essentially shut it down, which definitely wasn't the case. In these documents, dude, like there's actual sessions of these remote viewers, what they were doing on these targets, right? And they turned out to be very freaking accurate, right? Drawings and descriptions of areas, the altitude, the wind rate, very descriptive details that were given by these remote viewers on these targets. But remember, the CIA had its hands in this whole thing from the jump, and they were funding SRI International from 73 to 75, and then the Air Force jumped in 76 and started funding SRI. DIA and Army Intelligence also had a contract with SRI. NSA also had their hands in the pot too, whether that be funding or doing their own kind of operation or their own unit. So really, there it is. That's the history of the government's remote viewing and psychic programs. I hope it wasn't too boring.
No,
but
not at
that's
all.
that's really the whole history and what I've been able to put together reading through all these documents. And even if there's someone that's listening to this that doesn't believe that psychic phenomenon, ESP, telekinesis, psychoenergetics is real, it doesn't matter because the government did.
I
And
think
they
we even said
were-
that on the show when we did it. We were like, yo, even if you think this stuff is silly, the government believes it's real.
Exactly, dude. Exactly. And they believe that it was so real that they were studying it as far back as the 40s. So, and they've opened up multiple programs. All of the intelligence community, the military has all been involved in one form or another. And all of this information comes directly from official declassified documents.
Now, you say something about back like in the 40s. Do you know if has Germany ever been involved in stuff like this?
That I'm not sure. The document that I read just listed, it was an overview of the program. It was actually a presentation that the DIA was giving to other contractors and people for funding to fund the program. And it was like a slideshow presentation that they were giving. And it just, it kind of went through the entire history of the study of remote viewers and psychic ESP, psychoenergetic phenomenon, and it just listed the all the studies of it from far back as from Duke University, I believe, was in the 40s. Now, as far as other countries doing the kind of research, I mean, obviously Russia was doing the research because they actually got all of those German paperclip Nazis after World War II, and they basically got all of the woo-woo people, is what Russia got. It wasn't just the United States that got the Project Paperclip people. We got the people that we wanted, which was the scientists and the rocket engineers and all that. But Russia got the woo-woo people that were doing it. So in that, knowing that, then that absolutely means that Germany was doing this kind of research as well. But as far as proof and documentation, I have not stumbled across any. But knowing that Russia got the woo-woo people and the psychic researchers and the ESP researchers and the parapsychology and the para-energetic researchers into Russia, then that automatically means that Germany was, in fact, doing experimentation on it.
Yeah, that's. I had just assumed, like, when you mentioned it going back that far, I was like, well, that would make sense if I hate to say it, the Nazis, I would assume were involved in that if it's, was supposedly been a thing since the 1940s, because they were very, I think, just very occulted and very magical. Somewhere, I think somewhere when you're talking about Nazis, it may not be the people on the ground with the guns or even the scientists, but I think there is a magician somewhere involved in there. That's just my opinion. I think it's actually like almost an occult order in a sense, but
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
my opinion.
There was this group called NIMSA that was a German group that was, well, it wasn't a German group, it was actually a Prussian group before Germany was established as Germany. It was named Prussia before that. And I had a lot of individuals that was interested in occult mysteries and occult theology and philosophy and stuff like that. And then that gets tied into the OTO with Aleister Crowley. And NIMSA was actually funding this group in the mid 1800s called the Sonaro Aero Club in Northern California that was trying to develop anti-gravity craft using a spinning green mercury fuel additive into their craft. And they did do that. And then when you go back and look through all of the newspaper articles and newspaper clippings trying to track back the UFO phenomenon, you'll see around that time of the mid 1800s, people were seeing weird shit in the sky. Then you fast forward a little bit to World War II. Walter Bosley has written several books about NIMSA and the Sonaro Aero Club. That's where I got all that information from, and he's been on my show several times. He was just in a roundtable discussion that I had with Kathy O'Brien, Dr. David Morehouse. And then you fast forward a little bit to World War II, and the Nazis were working on the same type of craft with the Galaka Bell technology, but they were using a red spinning mercury fuel additive to let their craft lift up off of the ground. Right. So it was basically the same type of thing that they were doing when NIMSA was funding the Sonara Aero Club in Northern California. They basically just took those schematics and everything to Germany during World War II because they had already known about it and they had already created it and then applied it to their craft, the Galaka Bell technology during World War II. And then that's how we get this man-made anti-gravity craft that everyone's mistaking for UFOs and extraterrestrial craft.
Wow. I wanted to ask you before, kind of like rewinding a little bit. You mentioned Ingo Swann, and wasn't he like associated with Hal Puthoff too?
Yes, Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ were they became involved with SRI in 73 whenever they started that project to study psychics and remote viewers and para energetic phenomenon that was funded by the CIA. Ego Swan was one of the test subjects. Pat Price was another one of the test subjects, and Uri Geller was another test subject during that run of SRI. And then that's whenever that project Syndicate came into play, and they were trying to test the capabilities of these remote viewers to try and find out if they're just making stuff up, if they're getting stuff subliminally, if they're just getting it from memory. And that's when Hal Puthoff gave those coordinates to Ingo Swann of a cabin that he had in West Virginia. But Ingo didn't see the cabin. He saw the military base that was right over the hill. And then they gave those same coordinates to Pat Price, and then Pat Price got better details on the military base, and that's whenever he went in psychically and got all that classified information from the code names of the program that they were using in that classified underground military base in West Virginia, and that's what got the attention of all the intelligence community to take this phenomenon 100% seriously.
Something I was going to ask with these people. I've only looked into. I know, I think a few of them are associated with SRI, but I just sometimes wonder. And I'm not discrediting these people. I'm just I just feel like sometimes they just pop up, And it's like, where were you before you? Who were you before SRI? I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, sometimes I wonder, like, where these people come from with this too. I mean, not saying they're shady. It's just, I don't know.
Well, really,
Like, how did you even get into, like, how did some of these people even, like, get into, like, knowing about this to study it? Like,
You mean the like Hal Puthoff and
Yeah, and, like, Ingo
Russell
Swan.
Targ?
Yeah, and, like, yes, maybe, I know Hal Puthoff was one of them that I was talking about, for sure. Because I have looked
Well,
into
they
him a little
were
bit.
laser physicist scientists.
Oh, okay. All
Hal
right.
Puthoff and Russell Targ were both laser physicists. They worked with lasers, and as far as where the people came from that were the test subjects, Ingo Swan talked about that he had, which Pat Price and Ingo Swan are both dead. Ingo Swan, I think, died in, don't quote me, but I think in 2013 or maybe a little bit later. I'm not 100% sure that. I have to go back and verify, but it wasn't too long ago that he died. But Pat Price died in 75, almost immediately after he was doing all these tests for SRI. He was found in a hotel room in California dead. So very fishy circumstances. I don't really know exactly what happened there. There's a lot of information surrounding his death. Some people think the CIA faked his death, and so that they could work with him privately, which is I think is a very solid theory, because they were trying to split Pat Price from SRI to work with them directly, and that's what happened. And then the CIA cut their funding to SRI. So all these things are kind of lining up to make it seem like they possibly could have faked Pat Price's death to transfer him to a private remote viewing unit in some kind of off limits facility, top secret underground facility that no one would ever know that he's alive. And there's also evidence of that where he called his family and his friends the night before he died, basically cryptically told them that, said his goodbyes to them, and then also took out a big, huge life insurance policy to leave his daughter and his wife too. So there's some evidence to back that claim up. But the other theory is that the CIA just straight up killed him. Now, in the because he was, or the CIA either killed him or the Soviet Union came in and killed him. Again, both of those are very plausible for the times, right? But Uri Geller in the documentary Third Eye Spies with Russell Targ, that has Hal Puthoff, has Joseph McMoneagle, has Del Graft, and all these people in it, which I think is a very solid documentary. Russell Targ goes to Uri Geller and asks him about Pat Price's death. And Uri Geller basically says, listen, they don't ever take anybody out like that. Somebody that's so valuable that can legitimately see anything on the planet, no matter the distance between the target and the viewer, they're never going to take him out. They're never going to let him be killed. Ever. It's like a goose that lays golden eggs. You don't take that kind of person out, which then feeds into the theory that the CIA faked his death in order to work with him directly, which I think is very plausible. But again, there's no proof and there's no evidence that that happened. It's more likely that the Soviet Union came in and took him out, because there is evidence of people on record saying that they dosed a gentleman, a psychic in the United States, with some kind of poison to kill them. Now, we don't know if that's just a made up story to get people off of the trail, but there's very little information on Pat Price. If you Google Pat Price's name, you can hardly find anything. It's difficult to even find a picture of the dude. And I think that's other verifying evidence that they faked his death and then took him to some other place to work.
You don't even know what this dead guy looks like.
Yep.
That's pretty good point. You mentioned Joseph McMoneagle before. Wasn't he somebody that, like, kind of did interviews, I think, or at least I think I came across supposedly, like, his opinions or experiences with the gateway stuff. Wasn't he kind of somebody who did give out some information about it?
Yes, he was involved in the Sunstreak program, and then later on, he got involved with the Monroe Institute, which the Monroe Institute is the Gateway program, is the Gateway project, and that's where this whole thing comes into Army intelligence paying Monroe Institute $2,000 to take their assets to Robert Monroe to have them trained. So Joseph McMoneagle kind of went over there, and it's suspected that he was a part of the $2,000 payment to Monroe Institute to study the out of body experiences, the hemisyncing of the brain, listening to the two frequencies that combine the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of the brain into one and to induce an out of body experience. But Joseph McMoneagle fell in love with Robert Monroe's daughter. And he also brought over Skip Atwater, which Skip Atwater was also a part of the remote viewing unit, to the Monroe Institute. And this is where the muddying of the waters comes in between the Gateway Project and the Stargate Project, is that it's theorized that Joseph McMoneagle and Skip Atwater was trying to get more funding from the military and the intelligence community to study more at Monroe Institute to give them more money, because Joseph McMoneagle was in love with Skip Atwater's daughter. So why wouldn't you want the Army intelligence and the intelligence agencies, the CIA, and all that funding research at this other project? So
That's funny. Real quick, what do you remember offhand where the Monroe Institute was located?
they moved a couple of times. I think at one time they were in Virginia.
Okay.
They went to Virginia. They might have started in California, then went to Virginia, and then they moved one other time. I researched it not too long ago, but I'm not remembering too great off the top of my head. But they did move one time into Virginia. Yeah.
Yeah.
They relocated at least 3 times.
Yeah, and that wasn't the guy Monroe himself like into broadcasting prior, and like had radio stations too.
Yes, that's what got him into doing this frequency hemisync kind of technology. But she wasn't the first person to do this. This has been being done for a really long time. In ancient times, they would do almost the exact same thing. They would put big tubes on either side of people's heads and then ding like frequencies into their head to try and hemisync to induce some kind of spiritual experience. So he wasn't the first person to do it, but he was, one of the people that kind of popularized it. And the people in the unit did have access to those tapes, but I think that, again, that was a deal that was kind of struck between Army intelligence and the Monroe Institute. They had those cassette tapes from the Monroe Institute available for them to use. And Lynn Buchanan says that he personally used the tapes as like a cool down method after the remote viewing session. So you throw on the hemisync tapes from the Monroe Institute to help him cool down and relax after doing remote viewing a target for intelligence collection and data.
That's funny. In your opinion, do you think there's something behind those tapes? Do you think they do something and they work or help or aid in something?
I really haven't listened to a lot of them. I tried to lay down and listen to one because it said that you're supposed to listen to it at night as you're going to sleep. But I just can't listen to anything when I'm going to sleep, dude. I got to have everything off.
Gotcha.
Like I can't have the TV on. I can't have, a podcast playing. Like it's got to be like dead quiet. So it's very difficult for me to use it when I'm going to sleep, especially with headphones in, because I got to be comfortable, dude. I just can't be, having this weird stuff on my head and things. I've even tried to do like this mask, this face mask that covers your eyes that induces like lucid dreaming, that flashes light, like red light, into your brain. to induce some kind of lucid dreaming to make you realize that you're dreaming, so you can wake up inside of your dream and control it. And I couldn't sleep with it on ever. So I don't know. I think that, I mean, there's been a lot of people that said that it's really helped them. Maybe I should try and do it, whenever I'm awake and just walking around, or like Lynn Buchanan was saying, using it to like as a relaxing and a calming thing. Some people swear by it. Some people say that it really works and it helps them a lot. So I don't know. I've never really experienced it or messed with it much.
No, I think it can. I mean, I only got like 3 tapes in out of like the ridiculous amount that there is, but yeah, I do think it. I think there's something there already, for sure. I mean, even just a lot of the stuff that they talk about with the hemi syncing, I think is like kind of like what magic is in a sense, in a way, anyway. So I definitely think it works. I've noticed experience, and put it this is why I think it works, is that like a lot of times when I had like I guess more intense or magical experiences, it was always just meditating. It wasn't me doing all this silly ritual stuff. It was more just really in deep meditation. And there's like certain physical feelings that I would have that became almost like normal or clockwork, and like almost like visuals that I would see with my eyes closed before I'd have these experiences. And when I started using those tapes, by the time I got to the third one, I started feeling like familiar body feelings that I would get before I started really taking off and going out there. And I was like, okay, I already know where this is going to take me. Like, I already know it's already doing its job. So I stopped. But I definitely think from that experience, that is why I think there is something probably legit with those tapes.
Well, out-of-body experiences, I think, are really connected to this whole psychic phenomenon, right? And a lot of the remote viewers that were a part of the unit, they completely disagree with me on, but I'm standing firm on it, and I'll argue with them every single time, because almost all of these people that have developed natural abilities, because it talks about in this SRI document that the test subjects at SRI already had developed natural abilities to do this, right? So how did they get those developed natural abilities? Well, Ingo Swann talks about.
See, that's kind of what I was getting at before when I was like, who are these people? Like, how did you ever get to that point, what we're getting at now? That's the stuff that confuses me.
Yeah, well, the Army intelligence and that unit, they were all in. There wasn't any civilians. I think there was only one civilian that was actually brought into the Army intelligence unit that was outside of the military. All the other people had prior military service.
Yeah, no, it's just the whole thing of just like these people already had these experiences and here they are. It's like, well, how did you get to having an out-of-body experience, like you're saying before?
Yeah, Ingo Swann mentioned several times through interviews that he had his out-of-body experiences through being bullied as a child for being gay. Now, it's not a secret that he was gay. Like, who cares that he was gay? It doesn't matter. But what does matter is the process of getting those abilities. And a lot of people that I've talked to that are psychics and that are remote viewers that have had this natural ability for a long time, I would say a lot of them, not saying all of them, because some people can just be born with the ability to do it. But I think that for a lot of people, it's unlocked within us. The potential is unlocked. And the unlocking of those abilities is done through an out-of-body experience or a near-death experience. And this is another connection to the Monroe Institute and why they were trying to study that, right? And this also connects back to the MKUltra experimentation that the CIA was doing, right? When you torture somebody, you put them through trauma, they're automatically going to have an out-of-body experience. They're going to disassociate from their body.
I've said that plenty of times just in art, in my opinion, when you see people that might have, there's artists out there that will admit that they might have experienced some sort of kind of ritual abuse. And a lot of them all have commonalities with painting pictures where it looks like they're there and then there's like an imprint away from it. It's almost as if, like, I think the soul will detach itself from the body to get away from the experience it's having.
Exactly. And that is so freaking key, dude. And what I've been trying to explain, but I haven't been getting it across in a way that really makes a lot of sense to people. But when you look back through the dissociative aspect and DID and multiple personality disorder, that's normally caused by a compartmentalization of the brain through some kind of trauma. Now, you don't have to have you wouldn't have to have been through an MK Ultra process or a governmental program to have DID or multiple personality disorder. That can just be done through real life trauma, like everyday trauma. Some traumatic experience happening in your childhood can split your consciousness and create a an out of body experience or some kind of near death
You
experience.
just watch the news enough.
And that's what they've done too. It's a traumatic event, so then that they can come in and then program you through that traumatic event, so they can get away with things that under normal circumstances they wouldn't be able to get away with, right? So these things are all connected. The MK Ultra programs are connected. The out of body experiences through the Monroe Institute is connected. The psychic experiments through the DIA was connected. And I think that the CIA and Army intelligence was investigating the Monroe Institute on their out of body experiences, because I think that psychic experiences and ESP and telekinesis was a byproduct of MK Ultra. They realized through fracturing the mind, after that was over, these subjects were developing some kind of spiritual psychic ESP ability. So then they were like, okay, well, can we do this without the torture? Can we do this without torturing people to the brink of near death? Because that's what a lot of people in those MK Ultra programs had done to them. They were literally tortured until like near death, so that they can have that dissociative aspect to get outside of their body, right? So it only makes sense that Army intelligence and CIA would study out of body experiences to see if they can induce that without the trauma, see if they can develop that naturally through the hemisync process that Robert Monroe was doing. So therefore, they can create psychic abilities. Not saying create it from scratch, because I believe that we all have the ability to be psychic, right? We all have that psychic ability, but unlocking that psychic ability in people that otherwise didn't know that it was even a human potential.
You know, I think you nailed it with like kind of the out of body experiences. You know, and then you even mentioned NDEs as well. And you know, not to get into it too much, but like, you know, I've mentioned before on my show, and I just mentioned earlier how I would have typical physical feelings and visuals before, you know, I'd have like these magical experiences, I call them. And, you know, and I would end up being somewhere, I mean, to me, you know, it ends up becoming a point with my eyes closed that I am ending. It's like I step into an HD TV that looks more realistic than here. Wherever I am, regardless if my body's here, my brain is not in this fucking world. So I consider this an out-of-body experience, in a sense. There is certain things that I said I would experience prior to, like, you know, the magic happening, that I have also realized a lot of people with NDEs have had as well. And I even had a few of them on the show. But, yeah, so I do really think there's something up with, if you've already had that experience, maybe seeing if there's ways of kind of like pushing it farther or hacking into that and seeing where can we go. Can we be almost like very pinpointing where we want to go, in a sense, you know? So I do think there is a connection. What you're getting at with the NDEs and the OBEs, I do think that that is the key, actually, really, to making all this, I think, work, in a sense.
Exactly. And there are people that are just naturally born psychic. Now, and you know, you don't have to have a near death experience or an out of body experience to be able to remote view. That's proven through the Army intelligence assets and the DIA assets that were brought into the unit. They were trained, most of them were trained on how to remote view. The only people that really had an ability before that was uh, Joe McMonagle. I believe he had a near death experience before he was brought into the unit. Dr. David Morehouse had a near-death experience before he was brought into the unit. He was shot in the helmet during combat. Now he says that those two things aren't connected, but I disagree with him. I think that they are. Now he'll tell you straight to your face, no, that's not the reason why I was brought in the unit. It had nothing to do with my abilities. We all have the ability to do this, which I'm not disagreeing with him, but it does activate the ability. If you didn't have it prior, if you didn't have it previously, if you weren't born with the ability, an out-of-body experience or a near-death experience, most of the time, I personally believe, no proof of it, activates that ability and that perceptual idea of being able to be psychic, to remote view. Right?
That's funny. You know what's so funny? I'm thinking about this now, and then maybe after this, if you don't mind, we'll wrap it up. I'm wondering if maybe we could actually do like a part 2 to this, possibly talk about more stuff. But you're talking about the NDEs, and like I didn't even realize, like it just popped into my head now. You know, and I've mentioned before on my show, I'm not going to get too descriptive because I don't want to worry about fucking copyright strikes. But with initiations that I've done in the OTO, there is times where they will slap areas where there is like a chakra. And after you do an initiation, there will be a class that you can take probably a few weeks or a month after the fact with somebody who did the initiation, kind of like giving a little bit more of an idea of what you just went through, because kind of like when you're there and going through it, you're not seeing everything, especially if there's only like one candle in the room. You're not seeing everything that's fucking there. So, you know, they kind of give you another chance to go over like what you just went through and kind of like hit you off with a few gems maybe, or loaded with a bunch of bullshit. But, you know, they did come out and tell me that they are touching, or, you know, had there's reasons to touch or slap certain areas of your body, it was to activate chakras. So now they're already admitting to me that they're doing that. Now, I know just from other secret societies that I've seen stuff online, there is, and I can't really think of it a click, in one of their initiations, it is basically reenacting a near-death experience. You know, and you think about that with the skull and bones, with the coffin, the near-death experience, like, maybe this is saying something too, you know? This near-death experience, maybe something like that is tied into these weird magical things that people can do.
I agree, and there's a lot of theory.
Or there's something behind that experience that can maybe change you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And I've also speculated that who's to say during a near-death experience that it's the same consciousness that left the body is the same consciousness that comes back?
I believe that that's also another whole game that can be played, actually. Believe it or not, I do entertain that idea. I mean, fucking Netflix showed us it in a fucking series.
Yep.
Sometimes I hate to say it, the silly shit that I think is on Netflix, it's like, no, that's actually real, and they're just making a silly B movie out of it. But there was like even a show on Netflix where there was a girl and a guy, and I've mentioned this before on my show, people probably heard it, and they both were able to astral travel, and her friend was gay, and her friend had a crush on her man. So, like, instead of them going back to the bodies they were supposed to, he was like, nah, I'm going in yours.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to get the dude, and now souls got switched up, people died, and things got all fucked up. But I was like, yo, I do believe that's possible. I actually do believe that's even stuff in rituals where they will pull out the soul and replace it with something else. I do believe that's real. Some people might think I'm crazy for saying that.
Nope. I agree. I agree with you 100%. There's actually another show on Hulu that's called Black Box, where there's this doctor in a hospital that gets a person that was completely brain dead, and she saved the consciousness into a technology from her son passing away. Then he put his consciousness into the person that was brain dead.
I remember that was the Black Mirror. Black Mirror, right? That was one of their. Wasn't that a Black Mirror episode?
This is a movie. It's a newer movie. That
there was a Black Mirror episode like that too. You got to check out the last Black Mirror series. There's one episode that's all on like this. Them putting their consciousness into shit. It's fucking bizarre.
And then there's also another Netflix show that's called Travelers. That's about a consciousness transfer program from the future that's bringing back people from the future that's operated by this AI, artificial intelligence program, to people that are going to be dying in the near future. Then they switch out their consciousness with a consciousness from the future to try and save the world. So it's out there. I think that it's very possible, and I think
Wow.
that is a big part of these rituals and initiations, like, right, because people are changed after these rituals and these initiations, right, into some of these high up societies and these dark, well, I don't know if they're really dark. I think that what they're doing is just unknown to people. It doesn't mean that it's dark, but they're doing something with the consciousness, and it could be a complete switch out of the consciousness, bring in a new consciousness in, and then, or it could be some kind of overlay system. It's
Well,
kind of like with have you seen the OA on Netflix?
yes. I just did a. I had somebody on covering that. We did a 2 episode series on that.
So in the second season of the OA, whenever they time travel to that other parallel reality, that parallel dimension, the main character of the show didn't have any of the memories from the person that she from the new person that she was in the new body in the parallel timeline, right? She didn't have any of those people's memories. She just had her memories from the old timeline. But the other people that jumped had both memories from that person's timeline and their timeline all combined into one. So they were able to remember everything from this parallel timeline and the timeline that they came from too. But she had to integrate that consciousness that she wasn't living in that parallel timeline. And when she integrated that, everything opened up and she was able to combine both of the two separate consciousnesses from both separate parallel timelines into one. So that could be something that's happening too. You get a separate consciousness that comes in. There's kind of like an overlay system where both of them are kind of conjoined into one consciousness.
I mean, I not to get too far into this because fucking go on forever talking about this, but like, I've even wondered. It's like if we entertain that this whole thing is possible, what's to stop somebody from technically living forever? You know what I'm saying? Or just knowing so much stuff because they just keep going from the next to the next. Like you technically could be like, you could like manipulate people and civilizations just from life experience of 200 years. You know what I'm saying? Just
I think that that's what they figured out. I think they figured out that consciousness transfer kind of technology, and that doesn't mean that it's an actual technology. It's a technology in the way that it's a kind of a spiritual experience, and there's a lot of ways to do it that doesn't involve any kind of technological
oh yeah, I agree with that.
implementation. Like it can be done spiritually if you know
Totally
exactly
agree.
what you're doing. But our bodies have purposefully been made, I personally believe, to not live that long. But the way that we can live for extended periods of time is a consciousness transfer type of way to do it. And I think that that's what these aliens and these ETs are. I think that they are doll bodied avatars that were created specifically for that mission to inhabit somebody else's consciousness, and they can switch out that avatar, they can switch out that body at any time that they want. If they want to be a reptilian being, they just go to their closet and whip up their consciousness into a reptilian avatar skin. If they want to be a Palladian, tall, blue-eyed, blonde-haired Palladian, they just go to their closet and whip out a tall, blonde, blue-haired, blue-eyed alien to be in that day. I think that's what they're doing, and I think that it's all one consciousness, and they can change it depending on what their objective or what their mission is or whatever it is they want to do on that day or that week or that year.
Listen, I totally do agree that I do think that stuff happens. I am 100% on board with you. I do think weird shit like that is going on. Is there anything else with this topic that you want to say before we? Oh, one thing I did want to mention too was real quick. I mean, I'm sure you even noticed, even with like shamans and Native Americans, they even get into like NDEs to an extent, or that you'll see them explain like you won't have this experience and until like you have. It's almost as if they're explaining an NDE, in my opinion. Sometimes, that's kind of the self-initiatory thing you have to go through in order to be able to understand and do these things. To me, seems very almost NDE in itself. Like maybe technically really dying. Like maybe you are in a sense.
Well, I mean, that's the whole point of the plant medicines. That's what the plant medicines do, is
I've
they
often wondered about
simulate
that.
a NDE
I've
near-death
wondered.
experience. Now, that's an artificial one. You know what I mean?
That's interesting.
But it can potentially have the exact same effects as a real near-death experience. I mean, that's what DMT does. You die. DMT kills your freaking soul, and then you come back. Same with ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is just a drinkable form of DMT. You drink it, and you stay. It's a less heavy onset. With DMT, you smoke DMT, and you're instantly gone.
Oh yeah.
You're instantly someplace else, right? So I do believe that they know that, and that they've been working with those medicines for a very long time, and they know that that's some sort of initiation process. I mean, it's speculated. Some people have talked about that. That's what happened to the character of Jesus. Now, I don't believe that Jesus was an actual physical being. I believe that he was an allegory and a story for enlightenment, right? But that's what people have theorized happened to Jesus, is that he took some sort of plant medicine, whether that be mushrooms or smoked some DMT or did some kind of ancient plant medicine, and he died for 3 days, what felt like 3 days. And then he came back and he was enlightened.
All right. There's a death involved anyway, still somehow.
Yep.
That's a good point. I love it. Is you want, I unfortunately, I think I kind of let you, I told you to, give an intro to yourself. I'm not sure if you ever actually plugged where people can find your stuff. If you did, maybe I don't remember, but let everybody know, like, I know you got YouTube and all this. Let everybody know where they can find your show.
You can find me on YouTube at Raised by Giants, on Rockfin, Raised by Giants, Odyssey, Rumble, and all of the different podcast platforms.
Yeah.
You can get me on Twitter at Raised by Giants 8 and Instagram at Raised by Giants Pod.
Nice. All right. I do have a couple of your. I'm gonna add you now on Twitter. I did include some of your links that you already gave me. So his links are in the bottom already. I do think I have your Instagram, your YouTube, and I think your Rockfin actually put in there. So I think I have those 3 now. Highly suggest to go check out his show. He does have. I have to say, I'm actually impressed with some of the guests he's had on. So I do highly suggest to go look at his show. He's had some pretty interesting guests on, so definitely check it out. I think it's worth listening to. I would really like to probably have you on again, so I'm sure my listeners will get to hear you as well. So I guess that will be the end of this episode with Ryder Lee. Thank you very much, my man. I had a good time. We had a bunch of people in the chat. That's why I go live. I'm sorry, just to let people know in Rumble and Odyssey, I do not know what you're saying while I'm in StreamYard. So I do try to jump back and say something, but I can't, see what you're really saying unless I pull away from the screen. But I do appreciate you also jumping in. So that's why I do it. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.
Thanks so much, brother.